Earth fall to the level of ordinary mortal before her very eyes? And how could he not? How would the conversation have gone, she wondered. Oh, here, Dad. Just a little hard seismic evidence that the critics were right after all about your friend Mick Walker's Cascadia Island project. Which means that not only is Mick going to be ruined, but my engineering firm may end up like Enron's accountants. And, oh, by the way, you'll probably be publicly accused of misusing your political influence on behalf of Walker for promoting his resort. Was there any way a loving daughter or anyone else could expect Ralph Lacombe to say, "Sure, honey, you go on and do whatever you have to do. Blow the whistle, destroy everything"? Not even her father was that brave or foolish. He would end up asking her not to pull the trigger, and she wouldn't be able to stand his plea or her denial. No, it was going to be far easier to deal with the damage after the fact, even if that method was cowardly. The island was always a time bomb, Dad, she thought. Pity poor old Mick didn't know it in time. What she'd found in the seismic test data meant that Cascadia Island off the Washington coast was too dangerous an outcropping to support any human habitation or facilities, and especially not a resort, hotel, and convention center. There was a massive split down the middle, a hidden fault line so profoundly active that Walker's resort would end up pulled in two with any substantial earthquake. And that same data, she knew, would also be seized upon by a certain scientist in Seattle as validation of his discredited hypothesis about the entire island being some sort of sensitive seismic trigger. According to the paper he'd published, Cascadia Island's small, rocky mass was supposedly resting on the geological equivalent of a hair trigger, a detonator connected to a massive fault zone deep within the Cascadia Subduction Zone. Other seismologists had loudly rejected Dr. Lam's ideas, but he continued to insist that any significant vibrations from that island could set off a chain reaction of amplified resonant vibrations and trigger a great earthquake equal to or greater than the monster that tore through Alaska in 1964. No one disputed the fact that the Cascadia Subduction Zone was one of the world's most dangerous tectonic faults. But the idea that the pile drivers and explosives used to build Mick Walker's world-class resort could uncork 300 years of unrelieved tectonic strain was just too far out to be real. Diane sipped the last of the extremely bitter espresso and smiled to herself. Dr. Lam's amplified resonant vibration theory was utter nonsense. If subterranean nuclear explosions were insufficient to trigger major earthquakes, a little construction activity on a coastal island had no chance of doing it. Maybe the rocks below did amplify any compression waves from a pile driver or rock blasting, but such impacts were ridiculously puny against the massive forces of nature. Nevertheless, she was very glad for Dr. Lam and his theory. He was exactly the man she needed for the dirty work of blowing the whistle on the hidden fault her firm had apparently missed long before construction began. Diane felt her heart accelerating. The last thing she needed was more caffeine, but if she had to have an addiction, coffee was fairly benign, especially after wrestling nicotine to the mat. She stood to go. "I'm out of here." She picked up her laptop case, paid the tab, and left quickly, setting a course for her flat and trying to retain just enough situational awareness to avoid becoming a hood ornament on various passing trucks. There were millions of dollars at stake. Maybe even 100 million of Mick Walker's dollars, and God knew how much she was about to damage Chadwick and Noble, the globe-girdling, prestigious firm that had reached down from the heavens of architectural engineering to pluck her from the newly graduated masses. She felt another brief and distant echo of guilt over that. The chairman, Robert Nelms, was a straight shooter, or so she'd always believed. But how could he do anything but suppress, cover up, deny, and hide when he discovered what the real data said? She recalled her first meeting with Robert Nelms so clearly. She, the Stanford graduate student shown into the elaborately decorated corner office. He, a man whose girth made him look like an amalgam of Charles Lawton, Raymond Burr, and Marlon Brando in his later years. The effect had been instant intimidation heaped on a towering platter of insecurity, even though Nelms couldn't have been nicer, rising with surprising ease and polished courtliness to take her hand and welcome her. It was clearly an interview, as she had hoped, but he made it pleasant, impressing her with the easy way he wore the mantle of power of the managing partner of such an august firm, not to mention his own impressive professional history as a brilliant engineer. She had left the office not only aching to work for Chadwick and Noble, but wanting